Hello guys, welcome back to Scared in the Name of Science, Season 2, Episode 11. This is my last episode.
It really is.
I can't believe we're here already. This is bonkers.
Yeah, it's flown by.
It really has, but I'm really excited. This one, I was up until 4:30 this morning researching and writing this episode.
I got a message from Rox at 4:30 being like, can you read through this, please? No, Rox, I'm unconscious.
That's fair. So this one is going to be a little bit tangenty, but I do feel like 4am Roxy does her best work, you know? That's when Aliens vs. Fairies has come out and ABCs, but this is slightly more grounded, actually.
Rox isn't like a gremlin when it hits midnight and they're still awake. Everything just becomes so much worse.
It's not worse, I just become more, inspired. What can I say? I'm a night owl. So I did go down a little bit of a rabbit hole with it whilst researching different specific cases of fairy sightings. I was just so determined to find something provable or something that we can science out, because that's something we've struggled with a lot during this season is where's the evidence? Where are the scientific possibilities? Where's the reasoning to figure this out? And our whole thing has been trying to look at the science and go, well, could this explain X, Y, Z? And there hasn't really been much. It's been a lot of folklore this season. I decided I wanted to go back to the start, go back to where we began and look at the first thing we sort of mentioned about this, which was the rainbow magic fairies and how they were all linked to colours. Where does that come from? We've got, like, red fairies with their caps being dyed in human blood. We've got talks about them wearing purple or, like, bright red and blue to indicate royalty. We've got white for the ladies of the lake, which, by the way, I'm not convinced they're ghosts anymore. Just...
Well, I don't think they're real.
Yeah,
you can change your beliefs however you want.
So yeah, I'm not so sure that they're ghosts anymore. I'm kind of more leaning towards these fairies, or at least the Welsh version of them. But one colour in particular stood out to me. Any guesses?
It's 100% going to be green.
It's 100% going to be green. So what links can you think of with these colours? What connotations does it have?
So green, I mean, as we've seen with a lot of fairies, is linked with the natural world and nature and forestry and woodlands. I guess that would be the main kind of connotation.
Yeah, nature, exactly. When I thought back to fairies, I realised that green fairies were probably the one actually we've heard of the most. Tinkerbell, for example, wears a bright green dress. If you've ever watched the Moulin Rouge, there is the green absinthe fairy played by the wonderful Kylie Minogue. And last but not least, there is the green man whose face is everywhere. In my grandparents' allotment when I was growing up, in the Cornish gardens that I would play in as a kid, and in the iconography I saw my mum studying as she delved into witchcraft and folklore, he turns up everywhere. And I realised that green fairies specifically needed a little bit more exploration. Where did they come from? What did they represent? And was there any evidence of actually green fairies? So the first place to look was the most obvious. Who is the Green Man and where did he get his name? Any ideas?
I would have thought it would have been kind of inspired, like, from the Oak King and stuff.
Yeah, and he's supposed to be the same person as the Green Man, essentially. In lots of churches around the country, actually, you can find these really interesting carved faces. And these effigies were termed as the Green Man by Lady Raglan in 1939, when she spotted 3 carved faces within a church at St Jerome's Llangwm Echerhaf in Monmouthshire. I'm probably saying that horribly, I'm really sorry, I just really struggle with that CH sound. The Green Man is typically a male face whose hair and beard is made out of oak, hawthorn or ivy. Do you remember where these plants have come up before?
Now, oak, hawthorn, I would say, and ash would be the elder trees, but I wouldn't think that ivy would be included in that because it's a parasitic plant, not a tree.
I know you have an absolute hatred for ivy.
I hate ivy.
The amount of times we've gone exploring somewhere and you've just started ripping ivy off of stuff is fun.
Well, it's just like only when it's absolutely strangling a tree.
Yeah, but yeah, those 3 are considered elder trees or elder plants and are heavily associated with fairies and their entrances to land. The Green Man is supposed to embody the idea of nature and wilderness. Now, the reverend who put the Lady Raglan onto these carved things in the church actually disagreed on what the meaning could be. The Reverend Griffith of St Jerome's believed it symbolised a spirit of inspiration.
Wishy-washy.
Yeah. whereas Lady Raglan believed it to be a real man along the lines of Robin Hood or a leaf-clad murmur like a Jack in the Green. A Jack in the Green was typically a person dressed up who would dance and lead fertility processions on May Day. However, after further research, the Green Man as a term actually dates back much, much further than 1939 on the advent of World War II. St. Jerome's was built in the 12th century, which is when it was believed that this iconography was imported over from France as part of a myriad of figures in a style called Romanesque, because it was in turn adopted from the Roman multi-theistic faith. And another key point I'll come to in a second is there's something else that got imported over around the 12th century too, which you're not going to love, so we'll come back to that in a sec.
Ominous.
The original symbol was there to represent any of the following nature gods before the rampant Christianization of Roman Europe. So there's Cernunnos from Celtic mythology, or Dionysus, known as Bacchus in Rome, or Pan.
I thought Dionysus was the god of wine and, you know...
Wine comes from...
Yeah, but I wouldn't consider that as a nature, because wine's a process. Like,
he's also a fertility god.
Yeah, I was going to say wine and orgies, but I didn't know how PG you wanted me to keep this out.
Yeah, he is also a fertility god, and the Green Man is inherently linked with fertility rites as well.
That's fair, I just wouldn't have necessarily classed it as a nature god, but yeah, fair point, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, the first written record of the Green Man is actually in a play in 1578. Actus 1, Scene 6, which, why did we get rid of Actus and Scena? Oh my god. Phalanx, two men apparelled like green men at the May's feast with clubs of firework. So, essentially, they were dressed all in green with fireworks in hand. As you can see, this idea of a green man goes back a long, long time, and this idea of someone who led these processions has been written about for time, essentially. Whether it was to worship a god or to commemorate a celebratory ritual is unclear, but either way, I do think this, green leafy man with fireworks in hand is a pretty fun image. He belongs on the ghost ship with the fireworks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I personally think that humanity saw a massive tree and went, whoa, and decided, big thing, must worship. This could also have come about because of our dependence on nature for survival, so man created something to worship, and thus the Green Man was born.
I think with the worship of nature, it's more to do with the fact that it's like a cyclical process, it repeats itself, and we are fully encompassed by it, but we are just a fragment in the overall process.
Yeah.
And it's that, I don't know if it's the tree, if it's a big tree necessarily, or more the idea that we are a part of something that we could never possibly fathom for the full extent. Like, we might understand aspects of it, we might be able to quantify it and say this is what it is, but in a timescale sense, we will never have a clear picture.
Yeah, I also think it's worth...
perception.
I also think it's really important to note that we tend to end up deifying things that are bigger than ourselves, and trees last for generations, if you think back then to sort of the 12th to 18th century, people didn't live as long, so a tree could last for generations, even if it was only 100 years old, that could be 3-4 generations potentially, depending on people's lifespans. So, yeah, I can understand people being like, whoa, that's been here forever, let's worship it, essentially. The Green Man isn't just mentioned as an abstract piece of art that's been slapped across the country for whatever reason with thousands of pubs named after it. According to E.K. Chambers in 1903, not only did he beat Lady Raglan in terms of calling this character Green Man, but he actually associates it with someone really familiar to us. Last season, you mentioned another Green Man. Any ideas who?
Don't tell me I've got to talk about Arthurian legend.
Yeah, sorry, he's cropping up a little bit.
So I think you're referring to the tale of the Green Knight. I mean, God, it has been a year since I've read the tale.
Could you give us a little summary?
I want to say he turns up and wants to fight Arthur, but Gawain is like, I'll do it. And then Gawain cuts his head off and he just picks up his head and is like, cool, whatever you've done to you, I'm going to do to you. See you in a year, pal. Get your affairs in order.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then Gawain goes to fight him. I can't quite recall the ending.
Yeah, essentially, they fight. That is the end of the story, as far as I can remember.
Yeah.
But Professor Diane Purkis, you might recognise her name too, in her book Fairies and Fairy Stories, gives a few reasons why the Green Knight might have actually been a fairy. Number one, in the story, he is termed as everything about him is Enca green. His horse, body, clothes, hair. Enca being a loan word from French into Middle English, And Enca Green literally translates to meaning ink green. His horse was also green. He is related in the story to Morgan Le Fay, Morgan of the Fay, as well, which I think is interesting. She has heavy associations with magic and witchcraft and Avalon, which is the fairy kingdom, potentially. He lives in a green chapel, which when they go to said chapel is not actually a chapel, but is a long mound or a barrow, like we talked about a couple of episodes ago. He plays tricks on Arthur and Gawain to see what they will do with the head. He's just testing them, having a little fun. And he also, when he rocks up with a green axe and also a branch of holly, which is seen as another sacred fairy tree. All of which sounds very fairy-like to me. What do you think?
I mean, sure. It's I don't obviously think that the legends happen. I think they're just stories in the exact same way that I think that fairies are stories. So is it this story or this story? I don't really have too many strong opinions on it. Okay. Because yeah, sure, it's if you
sure, why not? It's a fairy. Sure.
Why not? Yeah, cool. It's a fairy.
The Arthurian legends was another thing that was imported over from France around the 12th century, so I think it's really interesting that we've got these introductions of these stories at the same time as we have these green men faces turning up, is essentially what I was alluding to earlier, but I know how we both feel about King Arthur, so I didn't want to...
It's not to knock the fella, but it's just he comes up all the time.
Well, he's about to come up again. So I decided to go and search for some more evidence of green-skinned fairies, because if there's one, there must be another, right?
More evidence. Loosest use of the word evidence.
So in my digging for green-skinned things, I found 4 very different accounts. Firstly, and unfortunately, King Arthur's getting a second mention here. He's here again, but this is the last time, I promise. In W.Y. Evan Wentz's Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries, he mentions this account. In Mythical archaeology, Arthur, when he reaches the realm of Melwas, speaks with Guinevere, his second of 3 wives, who all have the same name, by the way, and this isn't like...
He's got a type.
He really does, but also there's the authors don't differentiate which one it is at any point, but we think this is the second of 3. They all have the same name, so who knows. Guinevere, who rides a green horse and states, "Green is my steed of the tint of the leaves." Thoughts?
Yeah, he's got a green horse.
It's our second green horse, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's... Obviously, I don't think the horses are actually green. And if they are, then, probably be dyed or, leaf litter related.
However, I try my best not to take first sources literally, especially when I know that it's a collection from other stories. So I wanted to go back further to just double and triple check my sources and make sure that, where did Evan Wentz get this from? Is there more evidence of this? Can I look back to the original books, like the Black Book of Carmarthenshire, to find out and look deeper into it? And actually, when I went back to Mythical archaeology, I realised that Evans Wentz has completely mistranslated this. Dead ass, just mistranslated. In that book, the Welsh line is Glasifymach Olia Adael, which translates to, "My horse is blue from the colour of the leaves." Not green.
Okay.
And I was sat there and I was like, this took me 30 seconds to check on Google Translate, and I'm not even a Welsh speaker. And I was looking at the actual copy of the book as well, so it's not like I was looking at someone else's translation of a translation. This was the original written text. And I'm not gonna lie, this absolutely shook me. It was 2:30 in the morning, and I'm really glad I checked my sources, because he was just straight up wrong. My thought on this is I know that Evan Wentz was American and he was collecting stories from where he'd moved to in Wales, so maybe his translation was off, or he couldn't pick up the accent or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, that is really strange, but I think I'm more willing to... Blue is more likely than green. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I think blue is a potential exaggeration from grey. Sure. Because there are some shades of grey that do look kind of bluish in certain lights. It all depends on undertone, doesn't it? It does. And, when you think of, colloquial uses of blue that doesn't really mean blue, it's have you ever had a steak cooked blue? Yeah. Is it blue? No, it's just, still mooing on your plate, practically. Yeah.
And to be fair, even if I hadn't discovered this error, I was going to disprove this scientifically anyway, as green horses are genetically impossible. Just full stop. can't happen genetics-wise. Lots of different animals have colour dimorphism, so you can breed them to have different patterns and colours and things like that, but green is not a colour you can breed into horses. The basic coat colours of horses include chestnut, bay and black, and these are controlled by the interaction between two different genes. Melanocortin 1 receptor, MC1R, and agouti signalling protein, also known as ASIP. MC1R controls the production of red and black pigment, while ASIP controls the distribution of said black pigment. And whilst there are dilution genes, like you were just talking about, that could mean that it is like a very interesting grey colour that maybe has a slight blue hint to it, because you can get like pearlescent versions of these genes, it's still very limited to what can be produced with red and black and the complete withdrawal of these colours. So blue and green to a certain degree can't physically happen with a horse. And fun fact, albinism in horses fully doesn't exist.
That's interesting.
Yeah, they just don't have the genetic makeup for it. There are white horses who might have pink eyes and white skin and white hair, but it is not a form of albinism.
That's really interesting. Yeah. I was thinking, though, of a really stupid, simple solution for a green horse.
Yeah.
It's a white horse that's rolled around on cut grass.
No, yeah, that... yes, that could be an option. No genetically green horse, no actually blue horse. I know you're showing me a picture right now of a blue roan horse, but does that look blue to you?
Well, I mean, it's that's the thing, isn't it? That's the idea of, like, exaggerating, because in certain lights, maybe it has a bluish hue to its fur, and maybe that's enough to call it blue.
Yeah.
But yeah, you would not find, like, I don't know, I want to say, like, Chelsea blue horse or something.
Yeah, exactly. They just don't exist.
Yeah.
So I'm going to come on to my next example, which is from the Paranormal Database.
Woo woo!
In Blackpool, specifically Carleton Crematorium, in 1938, on the 31st of October, and this is why I love the Paranormal Database, because sometimes it is like place, receipts, facts, evidence, and then sometimes it's like goblins.
Yeah, just goblin.
Yeah. Anyway, a taxi driver was pulling up to the crematorium and looked through the gates. He suddenly spotted a green face belonging to a man with long dark hair and sunken eyes. The face moved across the windscreen and then disappeared. Fun fact, the taxi driver's passenger screamed and then legged it, so clearly had seen it too. Now, I don't think that's a fairy.
No, wouldn't want to experience it though, it sounds scary as hell.
I mean, it could just be a reflection, to be fair.
Yeah, but I mean, could also just be like a strange person doing strange things, which is, you know, very unsettling, to be honest. Yeah. I don't think I'd like that. I'd probably be spooked.
Yeah, during the night on Halloween, I'd also be like, ooh. But also, masks back then, I'm sure, were so terrifying if people were wearing them around Halloween.
Yeah, have you seen, like, the pictures of, like, the Easter Bunny from, dear lord.
Absolutely. So I definitely think it could just be someone playing a prank. It could be a ghost, I guess.
No, try again.
But yeah, it's very unlikely that this is a fairy, but it was just an interesting little fun one I found, I think.
Yeah.
My third one is probably the least detailed, but I thought, again, was really interesting. So deep diving through, again, Professor Diane Perkis's books, I happened across a reference to John Walsh of Netherbury, a man accused of witchcraft in 1566. According to the written records of his confession, he stated, and by stated I mean it was written down by his interrogators.
Trustworthy.
Exactly. Seventhly, he demanded how he knoweth when any man is bewitched. He saith that he knew it partly by the fairies, and said that there be 3 kinds of fairies, white, green, and black. It doesn't go into any more detail than that, but I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, that is really, really interesting. I'd never take the testimony of a torturer writing down things on behalf of a torturee as anything serious. That kind of does go back with, like, the life, nature, death aspects, but kind of it's all nature, really, isn't it? But yeah, no, I think those are fair colour associations. Yeah.
I couldn't actually find any record of what happened to John Walsh, so I don't know if he was executed for his supposed witchcraft, whether he was let go, if he was tortured or not. It just kind of seems like we have this really significant record of a normal person's words from back then, and then he disappears.
Yeah, a gentleman accused in 1566 of witchcraft, and then you can't see it, but I'm doing air quotes, discusses about how he does his witchcraft. I don't think he's walking away from anything.
No, probably not. The only other thing that sort of is left with that record is that they took away his magical book, and he said he could no longer do his magic because they had the book, so...
God, I wish women accused could just use that excuse. Yeah, I can't do magic anymore, fellas. I don't have my book.
Yeah.
I'll go on then, lass. Off you go.
I have one more for this episode, and oh boy, it's a doozy. Are you ready?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. Imagine yourself this little story as I'm telling it, please. It was the peak of summer for the harvesters of Woolpit in Sussex, who were beginning to collect in their crops ready for the winter and harvest festivals. It was the 12th century during the reign of King Stephen, and suddenly the harvesters heard children talking in a language they didn't understand. In front of them stood two young children, a boy and a girl. They looked completely normal, except for their skin and clothes. They were strangely dressed and completely, evenly, deeply green all over. The children didn't understand anything being said to them and refused to eat anything that they were offered despite them being starving. Eventually, they saw someone harvesting fresh cut beans and gestured for them to be given them. They were going to eat them raw, but were shown how to cook and prepare the beans properly and began to eat that for sustenance instead. They were then taken 8 miles from Woolpit to Wykes, where they were presented to Sir Richard of Calne, who provided a lot of the original accounts for this story as well. He gave them refuge, but unfortunately the young boy died shortly after they were baptised. The young girl did survive, but was of a most unruly nature. Over time, the girl lost her green coloration, learnt the language, and to eat all different types of food. Once she had enough language acquisition, she explained that they came from a land of perpetual twilight called St. Martin's Land, where everything and everyone was green, and it was majority Christian. She said that they had been herding cattle when they heard a loud noise, and suddenly they were coming out of a pit in Suffolk. She also mentioned that she couldn't eat what was offered at first because she thought it was inedible. What are your initial thoughts on the story?
So I have heard this story before. I think it is, it's a really, really interesting tale. I think the description deeply green is really interesting because you hear of people being green from like nausea or sickness maybe. There are some reasons that someone could perhaps be like tinted green, bruising for example. Yep. It's a tint. But deeply green is such a fascinating description.
Deeply evenly green.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
It is. No, that is a really, really interesting description.
Because, as you just said, I looked into so many different reasons that could explain this, and I will go into some in a moment, but bruising, I kind of had to go, well, it can't be that.
Well, it's not that it can't be, it's that it doesn't match the description perfectly. And of course you do need to look at things as though, is it a story or is it an accurate record, in which most cases it probably is not an accurate record.
Well, in this case it might actually be, because at the time the people that were taking this record were both, I think one was an abbot and one was the head of another church or something like that, and they were keeping the historical records for that time period. And as I said, one of the people who recounted this spoke to the actual family who took the children in themselves. So I do tend towards a little bit more of like, oh, that's interesting, why would they bother writing this down if there wasn't some facet of truth to it? I'm going to run through a couple of the options and we'll talk through each one as we go through it, I think. Cool. So, when I was first reading through this account, the first thing that sprung to my mind was that they were feral children.
Yeah, fair enough.
They could be children who got lost and somehow managed to survive, creating their own language between the two of them, as kids can do, and the power of the mind warped their situation to try and protect themselves from any abuse that had previously happened or the trauma of getting lost from their parents and separated. We have modern cases of this happening nowadays, where people are raised by cats or wolves or bears and things like that, and then they are discovered again and civilized, I think, is the term that is usually used. I don't know how much I like that as a term, but they're, taught the language, they're made to eat more things, and in some cases it's really, really successful, and in some cases it's really, really not. And obviously this could be an example there, because we have one kind of success story with the girl, but unfortunately the little boy passes away, so could be an option there. They're feral children. Doesn't
quite explain the green, but behaviours, sure.
Another theory that came up, you're going to love this, is aliens. The children were aliens.
It's not that I don't think aliens are real, it's just I don't see why we always have to depict them as humanoid. It's so self-centred.
So, in the 17th century, Robert Burton suggested that it could be that these are aliens from the moon.
The very populated moon.
Yep. You're going to love this one next, even more. However, Harold Wilkins vehemently disagreed with Robert Burton. Clearly, these were aliens that had teleported through a vortex from another planet. He suggested Mars because they said St. Martin's? St. Martin's? Or better yet, they're from a parallel universe.
It must have been absolutely banging to be a male scholar in the 17th century, because you could just say kind of whatever you wanted to say.
Yeah.
It didn't really matter if there wasn't actually any proof
Yeah, it's
of
not
it.
provable.
Yeah, it's not provable, but hey, I'm saying it and I'm a scholar, so you have to listen to me.
I will say Harold Wilkins is a more recent theory, like I think it's like the 1960s or something like that.
Oh no!
Yeah, let me just double check, hang on.
Harold, no!
Hang on, yeah, 1959.
Who is he? What's his study?
He's written a book called Mysteries Solved and Unsolved, so he's a writer.
Harold!
Harold, no!
Be better!
But yeah.
1960s isn't a reasonable time to be making this stuff. 17th century is! You can't have the same idea as someone from the 17th century and just suggest a slightly different, location.
Oh no, he vehemently disagreed with Robert Burton. Not the moon. It couldn't possibly be the moon, obviously.
Because it was Mars. It was the other M.
Let's go on to some actual, properly potential reasons for these green kids, shall we?
What, so you're saying Harold is making things up, is it?
Yeah, no. I don't think
You
they're
don't agree?
aliens.
You don't agree with Harold?
Well, I think they could be aliens as much as they could be fairies, and that I think fairies and aliens are the same damn thing.
Moving on to the other explanations, please.
So, the first medical explanation that we could look at is something called chlorosis, which is the original name for anemia. Chlorosis could affect the skin and could cause a discoloration. However, not as much as, it sounds like these kids were deeply green, but it could create that. Another thing that could cause the skin coloration is something called favism, which is caused by a deficiency of the glucose 6-phosphate and can lead to the breakdown of red blood cells. This can be triggered by the eating of broad fava beans, especially if raw and with the skin on. This also mostly affects children, particularly boys, which could explain why the boy died but the girl survived.
What's really interesting about that is that broad beans are, I think, one of the primary crops needed for survival over winter. The broad beans store fantastically.
And this was during harvest season as well.
Yeah, cool. That's a good explanation. I like that one.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
So, and it can cause a build-up of the green in the skin as well, so yeah, that could be a reason. And especially with the fact that when they saw someone harvesting beans, they were like, ooh, gimme.
Yeah.
You know?
A food I recognise and therefore edible
But
to me.
But, oh my god, I didn't know that I needed to cook and process it first.
Yeah.
Because they were kids. Another one was exogenous copper, so copper entering their system from an external source. And when I read that, I was like, oh my god, that's going to be it. They were in a copper mine or something like that for ages, hiding. It's the feral children linked with exogenous copper. Case closed, books sorted, dealt with. Hence why, over time, she got less green as well, because the copper faded from her system. Mm-hmm. Except, there are no copper deposits or mines anywhere near the area where the kids were found. Wrong end of the country. The kids did say that they'd seen the land from across a river, and then they went into a pit and then came out in Suffolk. But again, meh, don't know. Could be green dye from clothes.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned with the horse, they could dye their horse green. It could be green tattoos. This could also be explained by the Green Knight, who's discovered covered in Enca green ink. Mm-hmm. So maybe they're just covered in tattoos. But also I feel like even back then it would be a little bit unethical to tattoo your kids fully green.
With ethics and treating children in that time period, I think it was very fast and loose, wasn't it?
I mean, I guess, but even then tattoos were seen as really
Yeah,
taboo.
but that would be the problem, not that they were doing it to children.
No. Yeah, but still. So, on that one a little bit more. I also feel like the green dye from clothes, I mean, are they dunking the children in as well for that deep, even coating? Another option could be epicrine or ecrine chromhidrosis, which is a rare benign skin condition that creates intensely coloured sweat from near those specific glands, usually on the head and face and the trunk of the body, so that you sweat. This is also hereditary, which I thought was really interesting and could explain why both of them were green, if they were brother and sister.
Yeah, and it would also explain why the girl was saying that everyone was green, because if they were living in, like, somewhere where everyone was related, small towns, genes get around.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
they do indeed. So that could be an option. It doesn't really explain why she stopped being green, though, because it's hereditary. You can't get rid of it. It just is.
I think with underlying conditions, some things can, like, exacerbate.
Yeah.
And maybe if they were away from something that made it react a certain way. Obviously, I don't have any kind of, like, medical knowledge, so I can't really argue too much about the nature of that, but there might have been things that made it worse and things that made it better, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one is hyperbilirubinemia, which is green jaundice due to increased serum levels of biliverdin in association with biliary obstruction or liver failure. This is rare, but it is genetic, so it can be passed down from parent to kid. However, it does usually only occur when you become an adult. You do sometimes see it in, like, babies, though, where they're born this way, but it's very, very rare, so could be an option. My last medical thing that I thought was really interesting, and I stumbled upon this from a completely different angle, was Wilson's disease, which is a condition where copper builds up in your body. Your body just can't process it as well in the liver, so it builds up. It can create jaundice and also can create copper-coloured rings around your eyes.
Well, I feel like that's been mentioned in, like, I want to say, like, Scrubs or, like, House or something. Like, because I remember hearing of, like, the copper rings in your eyes. So, interesting.
My last sort of theory on what this could have been was, and I had to do it just because it was the first one that popped into my head, was the build-up of colour from food intake. Now, although this could be an option, and this is where we kind of mentioned it in the fava beans, it would need to be exclusively what the person eats, and it would need to be in huge quantities for the colour to appear. Obviously, the thing that I link it to is flamingos, who get their pink coloration from the shrimps who eat a specific type of algae that has a specific pigment in it. And the way that they break it down is they then send the pigment to their feathers and skin that creates that pink colour, but that's because they exclusively eat creatures and algae that has that pigment in it. In humans, we have a more balanced diet, which would more likely mean this isn't super possible. But I'm not going to say it could never happen.
Rox, I've got to say, I've really enjoyed your reasonable explanations. Plenty of pretty solid reasons that someone could be green.
A lot of the options here is, like, mildly green, like a bit of a tinge. Like,
yeah.
I'm sure you've seen pictures or videos of people with jaundice.
Yeah.
It never really gets to a thing where you'd be like, oh my god, they're highlighter yellow.
No.
It's the same kind of thing. They're kind of like, oh, they've got a tinge. Either way, I think it's safe to say that these were lost, vulnerable children who were found and taken in by strangers, and everyone just tried to do their best by them, at least as much as they could back then. And I think Diane Purkis actually sums it up the best that I can think of. The power of the story comes to an end from our pity for these ultimate strangers in a strange land, because they were, at the end of the day, just... yeah.
No, that's fair. Just to touch on the fairy angle of it all, the boy died after being baptised.
Yeah.
Which I think links back to, like, shapeshifters losing their powers when they are blessed or enter that threshold of church. However, the girl did say that everyone was Christian in her world.
Which surely they'd already been baptised then if she was Christian?
Yeah, so he probably just died, you know. Yeah. In which case there's no correlation. But
yeah,
I just thought it was interesting since you were looking at this
as
part of like the fairy angle.
Another fun fact about it is apparently their world was in a perpetual twilight as well.
That's nice.
Yeah. One other theory we could say about any of these stories is that they were greatly exaggerated, or at least in the green skin aspect.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, the children more likely had olive-coloured skin that just wasn't recognised as, like, a different skin tone, and maybe were potentially of Jewish descent. There was a population of Jewish individuals in Bury St Edmunds during the mid-12th century, which is when the children appeared, so it could explain many aspects of the story, the language, the different features, the clothes potentially. If they were Jewish, her calling the food inedible could mean that she just didn't know if it was kosher or not, for example. But this brings me to a final thought on this that blows my mind when I was researching this, because I'd never considered it before. In all these stories, the green of one's skin signifies the abnormal and the strange and an otherness. And an article I stumbled across suggested that this has been done intentionally for quite a while. Hammond explains, overtly racist cinematic depictions associated with real-world skin colours, particularly black skin, has decreased. Hollywood cinema has relocated these tropes onto green skin. What characters can you think of with green skin?
Wicked Witch of the West, was it?
Yep. Alphabet. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely, who's played by the amazing Cynthia Erivo. And the more I thought about it, the more I was shocked by, actually, yeah, Hammond's kind of got a point here. Hammond uses examples of the Grinch and Shrek, both of which white people single them out for being brutish. They are hunted down with torches and pitchforks regularly, something that did happen to black people. They are ostracised and forced to live in primitive segregated homes with less than others. When reading the article, it made me consider the portrayal of crooks in Of Mice and Men, and how similar that is to how green-skinned characters are portrayed nowadays, actually. Even the stories that we've talked about today, the Green Knight is seen as brutish and unfair for tricking Arthur and Gawain. The Green Man is a wild creature obsessed with fertility, both of which were stereotypes given to black people before we realised how racist that was. These folk tales perpetuate the stereotyping of other skin colours being treated differently, and that we're justified to do so. And I was just shocked to my core to have my eyes open to these sort of deeper rhetorics and meanings in these stories. I want to be really clear where I stand on this and say that any form of racism or discrimination is abhorrent, and we have to analyse these stories from a more deeper impact. Now, more so than ever, we need to analyse and look at what we're actually teaching and what we are putting out there into the media as well. Although these are stories, I think it's really important that we critically analyse these texts so we can look for any subtext that we are unknowingly passing on, and we can educate ourselves to be better at all times. So yeah, I'm not sure how I feel anymore about stories with green skin characters.
Yeah, I mean, you said earlier, like pitchforks and torches, early 19th century, but if you think about lynchings and all that kind of stuff, that's been going on for far too much into our recent histories as well. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a bit of a issue with quite a few folk tale creatures. I mean, with goblins, you've certainly got you see a lot of discourse online about J.K. Rowling's depictions of the Gringotts goblins, for example, in Harry Potter.
Which, as a kid reading it, I never saw.
Yeah, of course.
Now, as an adult, I go, ooh. Yeah. Especially with games like Hogwarts Legacy coming in and the entire rhetoric being kill the goblins because they are awful.
So yeah, it is important to kind of think about the influences for certain kind of folklore tales and areas in that subject.
Absolutely. So, I really enjoyed researching this episode, and I really enjoyed talking to you about it. I hope you've enjoyed my few ideas I could find about green fairies.
Yeah, it was interesting, especially because your last point about the green children had broadly nothing to do with green fairies. Well, in the sense that the case study you could find was more about green children, and when you were actually reading it, you weren't really looking at to say they were any kind of fairy. So I suppose it really just adds additional evidence to fairies not being.
Well, they could be fairies. I don't know.
I don't know. You did have a very long explanation of why it probably wasn't.
It could also just be that they ate a few too many beans.
Am I swaying Roxy's beliefs? Interesting.
No, I just am a little bit doubtful of an account from the 12th century.
Why couldn't you find any modern accounts, Rox?
I did!
Modern accounts.
Well, probably for the same reason that... I don't know, man.
A reoccurring theme. Fascinating.
But I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to this as well. We are available on Threads, Reddit, YouTube, Spotify and Instagram, so please feel free to get in touch with us. You can tag us on any of these at
#SITNOS.
Yeah. We also have our email address at scaredatthenameofscience@gmail.com. We would love to hear any of your accounts, so please feel free to get in touch with us and let us know if you've seen any green children, green fairies. Have you got any accounts of interesting, accounts of things going on? We'd love to talk to you about it and have a listen and see what's happened to you guys, essentially. But yeah, please leave us some comments down below, like, subscribe and follow us everywhere we are. And thanks. And thanks so much for listening.
Thanks, guys.